My social media is filled with well-meaning Americans declaring that the bombing of Iran is a righteous cause, that we are destroying evil and freeing the Iranian people from the horrors of theocratic dictatorship. That's a nice thought, but let me be clear. I understand the regime in Tehran is an evil dictatorship, but we have to remember, it was a reaction to the abuses of an earlier dictatorship under the Shah that our nation actually installed. But nearly 75% of Iranians were born after the '79 revolution with no memory of that Shah's abuses of power. Millions of them want exactly what we say we believe in: the freedom to live their lives without the dictates of a theocratic state, a state that has been telling them for 40 years that we are Satan and the enemy. Our president even speaks of helping the Iranian people make Iran great again. And we know he's serious because, one, he's got his best wingman showing off his new merchandise, and also this poster of the Shah's son. What exactly is the current administration going to ensure that the Iranian people, the very people we claim to support, actually see us as a source of their freedom rather than another source of more destruction? What is our war policy designed to achieve? Let's listen in and remind ourselves what our Secretary of War said about the mission of the War Department.
We fight to win. We unleash overwhelming and punishing violence on the enemy.
Overwhelming force, punishing violence on the enemy. Well, that certainly sounds serious, especially with that look on his face. But it raises another question. Who exactly is the enemy? How do we distinguish the enemy from the civilians we claim we want to protect? Historically, that is why civilized nations establish rules of engagement to limit harm to civilian populations while targeting those responsible for violence against us. So let's remind ourselves what Mr. Hegseth says about that.
We also don't fight with stupid rules of engagement. We untie the hands of our warfighters to intimidate, demoralize, hunt, and kill the enemies of our country. No more politically correct and overbearing rules of engagement. Just common sense, maximum lethality, and authority for warfighters.
Okay, what exactly is politically correct about trying to ensure that as few civilians as possible are not killed in the process of killing your enemies? If you can differentiate that. I mean, are we ensuring that our military understands the importance of limiting casualties among non-combatants? You know, the people who have been oppressed by this regime for over 40 years. Mr. Hegseth.
Well, today is another Liberation Day. The liberation of America's warriors, in name, in deed, and in authorities. You kill people and break things for a living. You are not politically correct and don't necessarily belong always in polite society.
Interesting. To kill and break things. Wow, that's tough. Yes, war does require killing enemies who are trying to kill you. But if the goal is actually to create a free Iran, then we should be trying to break as little as possible because, you know, when the fighting ends, Iran will still have to function as a country. It's in America's interest that it functions effectively. We don't want a failed state at the Strait of Hormuz. And it would be good to have Iranian oil added to the world supply chain after years and years of keeping it from availability. And that means we should ask a very uncomfortable question. How are we differentiating Iranian enemies from Iranian friends?
No one's putting us in danger. We're putting the other guys in danger. That's our job. So we're not concerned about that. We mitigate it as we need to. Our commanders factor all of this, but the only ones that need to be worried right now are Iranians that think they're going to live.
Okay, that answers that, doesn't it, Mr. Tough G.I. Joe man? So, as of Tuesday, March 10th, reports suggest that 40 to 48 senior leaders, commanders were killed in airstrikes. Those are the kinds of targets we would normally consider legitimate military objectives. But what does maximum lethality actually look like on the ground in Iran? Especially when you just focus on killing Iranians. Well, it looks like this. 1,200 plus civilians have been killed thus far. 12,000 have been injured, mostly from burns and crush injuries. Nearly 200 children have been killed, over 170 in that one school strike. And here are the graves that their parents had to dig for. Iranian Red Crescent reported 13 medical facilities, 9 crescent centers, 18 emergency locations, and 15 ambulances have been destroyed or damaged. Total clinical facilities, 29 damaged, and 10 have been shut down and taken out of service. Over 3,000 homes, 600 commercial centers, and 20 schools have been damaged. It also looks like destruction of the very society we claim we want to liberate. This is not a video game, but increasingly it is being treated like one, with slogans about strength and victory, and almost no discussion about responsibility toward the people we claim to care about. If we truly believe we are liberating the Iranian people, then we should also be honest about something else. Liberation comes with responsibility. If you break a society, you have a moral obligation to help rebuild it. Otherwise, you're not liberating people. You are simply adding chaos on top of suffering and leading to another cycle of reaction. But let's see what my South Carolina senator has to say about owning what we break.
Our job is to make sure Iran is no longer the largest state sponsor of terrorism, to help the people reconstruct a new government, no boots on the ground. We don't own, this idea you break it, you own it. I don't buy that one bit. It's in America's interest to make sure the Ayatollah is dead.
Really, Lindsay? That has to be one of the most idiotic bowl of party-approved word salad I have ever heard. Tell us, Lindsay, how are you going to achieve any of those aims by not helping ensure the chaos of war we have inflicted can evolve into a more civilized society? How can we do this without actually having people and occupation on the ground? Because the regime, still in power, maintains that power because it holds a monopoly of force on the ground. Iran doesn't have a Second Amendment. Just last month alone, that regime reportedly killed tens of thousands of protesters demanding change. Change that Donald Trump had promised them if they were killed. In fact, he sent the battle group that way and they got mowed down in the streets. So what happens when we bomb their country, weaken their society, and then walk away? The only way our nation is going to achieve a new government is either we go in or we supply arms to combatants that fight their way into leadership. And that scenario could easily lead to a chaotic failed state in the middle of a bloody civil war next to the most important avenue of world energy on the planet. But history gives us some warnings. We armed the Mujahideen in Afghanistan to drive out the Soviet Union. And when the Soviet Union got out and collapsed, and we declared that our mission was accomplished, and we simply just left. The result was chaos, and eventually the rise of forces armed with our weaponry far worse than the ones we originally opposed. And they came knocking on 9/11. See, the military can win battles, but wars are not won on battlefields alone. Wars are won in what happens after. World War II was not truly won just because Hitler died in his bunker and Berlin was taken. World War II was won when the United States stayed in Europe and invested in rebuilding it, invested millions and millions of dollars. Cities destroyed by war, many by our bombs, were rebuilt. Institutions were restored. Former enemies became trusted partners. Germany and Japan did not sustain freedom and prosperity because we won on the battlefield and on the Pacific alone. They became free and prosperous because we helped rebuild them. Once they signed the surrender, we treated the people with honor and respect. So if the goal in Iran is truly freedom for the Iranian people, as many of my friends on Facebook would have me believe, then we should be asking a much harder question. Are we preparing to help build a better future for them? Or are we simply repeating the same pattern of destruction, slogans, and abandonment that has defined so many of our wars in the last 50 years. Because if the Iranian people are supposed to see us as their friends, then our actions need to demonstrate something more than just brute force. Our actions need to demonstrate responsibility, humility, and faith in Iranian families that want a better life. Right now, far too much of this debate sounds like people cheering a war just for the sake of war with a bunch of blank, shallow bumper sticker slogans. Because without taking responsibility for the people who will have to live with its consequences, you just won't win it. Let's allow the president the final word on how well he is focused on how this ends. I'm sure the Iranian citizens would like to know.
I guess the worst case would be we do this and then somebody takes over who's as bad as the previous person, right? That could happen. We don't want that to happen. That would probably be the worst. You go through this and then in 5 years you realize you put somebody in who was no better.
Well, that answer tells us everything we need to know, doesn't it? War is being treated like a moment of political theater instead of a decision that will shape the lives of millions of human beings. And to those shouting that this is about freeing the Iranian people, be careful, because you may be setting up Iranians the same way Afghanis were portrayed, especially these two falling from a plane trying to escape our betrayal there. Did we ever learn? We can fix all this if we insist on reviving our republic. Take care.